every toothbrush that you and I and everyone else has ever used is just sitting here somewhere on this planet. The women produce 70% of the world's food and actually own only 3% of the world's land. And roughly, 2023, it's roughly the same. And the percentage is slightly higher when it is a female and a male co-founders of an enterprise, but still that number is like 6 or something percent, last I checked.
Hello and welcome to the Iconic Women podcast. Today's guest is a woman who not only feels passionately for the environment, but has dedicated her life's work towards making a change. In a time where Indian households are generating unprecedented amounts of waste, here's someone who has committed to keeping waste out of our landfills. An advocate for social equality, she is an author and the founder of the zero waste brand Bare Necessities, making sustainable personal care accessible using packaging that can easily be composted in our balcony gardens. Join me today to discover how Sahar Mansoor makes sustainability and entrepreneurship work hand in hand. Hi Sahar, and welcome to the Iconic Women podcast. I am super excited to have you here.
I'm super excited to talk to you. Thanks so much for having me.
I have to start by asking you, there is so much noise in this space of sustainability and claims to, products being eco-friendly, things like that. How does one separate the noise from the real stuff?
I think now there's a lot of greenwashing, right? I think brands want to also kind of align themselves with what's cool and what's trending, which is sustainability right now. But I think consumers are actually really smart, and I think we as consumers can ask questions and actually just look more and ask for, where were the products made, who made them, how much did they get paid for it. Maybe that information might not be obviously publicly available, but especially with clothing, the fashion revolution movement has done a really good job of kind of asking big brands these questions. But I think the more a brand kind of shares online, you automatically can have a little bit more trust and credibility about what's going on in the back end, because they might tell you this is this fabric, or as descriptive as, and how much ever detail with which they can share with you, I think is for me a total trust indicator, whether or not they might not have these fancy certifications, because also all of these certifications come with a really expensive cost. And having done a lot of field work with farmers in Karnataka, etc., I know when a farmer is genuinely producing great organic produce with lots of field work. So essentially, the more information a brand can share about their fabrics or how they're producing things, automatically you can kind of associate more trust with them. Having spent a lot of time in rural Karnataka working with farmers, etc., I know that they are genuinely trying their best and producing organic produce, but they also can't kind of afford USD organic or these fancy certifications. So I think just especially in the Indian landscape or other developing economies where certifications aren't super accessible, I think it's important to just ask brands information and also see how much they're being able to share with you. And I think that's a great way to kind of distinguish among the clutter. But having said that, brands that do have the time, headspace, investment to go ahead for these certifications, that's also great, because then again, that there are third parties that are actually validating all of the claims, looking at their supply chain, looking at how well they're treating their teammates, etc. So and just how they obviously fare on several environmental metrics. Just ask as many questions as you can, and as many answers as you get, you can kind of associate them with being more kind of trustworthy and it truly being sustainable in some lens that you might have for yourself.
Sure. And other than certifications, are there ways that we can know whether a brand the claims that they're making are real and true, or is it a tall claim?
Gosh, I don't know. It depends on the scale and the stage of different companies. And I do think there is a huge issue around greenwashing. It is genuinely something that brands are doing as a marketing gimmick to just perceive to be more green than they actually truly are in order to just get more kind of revenue and etc. So it is genuinely a problem, and I think we will see a lot of regulations on a state, national level as we progress. The EU actually is like the regulators of the world, and they've
Okay.
actually set up a lot of regulations around things, and I think slowly that is getting trickled to different parts of the world as well. So I think in the next few years we will see a lot of regulation as well around it.
What is the most challenging part of running a sustainability-based business in India? Because if I'm not wrong, this whole space is quite nascent in India now, isn't it?
Yeah. Gosh, how long do we have all day? Honestly, in terms of challenges, there are several.
Yeah.
I mean, trying to be a small business, trying to be against the tide with kind of what you're doing, how you're producing, the transparency, the storytelling around kind of your producers and where you're getting everything from. And sometimes consumers might not understand, price of a product, or maybe in India we're really used to this culture of discounting and like what's a good bargain.
Right.
And sometimes, if you are paying for certain things, it all comes at a certain cost. So how do you have a sustainable business that really advocates for environmental sustainability, but also how does that translate to financial sustainability when maybe the audience isn't fully ready for it?
Right.
But I will say that there is, this amazing emerging consumer base, millennials and others who are really looking to align their consumer choices with their values.
Right.
And, they are really smarter than consumers right now, are way smarter than, they used to be, I would say, 15 years ago, and
Right.
can also distinguish from the clutter and kind of are genuinely looking to align with their values with their consumer choices. And I think that
Right.
is the most positive trend I've seen, and that will only make this ecosystem of sustainable brands grow even more.
Bigger, yeah.
And I think we've already seen a mushrooming of more and more sustainable brands. So it's only a matter of few years when it's going to be super accessible, and it's an
Yeah.
economies of scale problem and solution. So as more people are creating more demand for sustainable products, more producers are going to make those sustainable products.
Sure.
And the prices are going to go down because, we're obviously demanding at that scale, and whenever we're producing things at that scale, it'll also kind of have those trickle-down effects to everyone.
Yeah.
So I think we're just going to see a lot of positive trends in this landscape.
But as things stand now, today, is price versus, kind of holding on to your values, is that a challenge that you have personally?
Yeah, I think sometimes it definitely is, but I think also sometimes you just have to articulate, why things are a certain way, why things are priced a certain way. Whether it is we get our cocoa butter from Orville, it's a woman-based enterprise that makes single origin chocolate.
Right.
A byproduct of them, making chocolate is this cocoa butter that is then used in 8 different of our products. So as much as you can also share with your consumers, I think will help just spread awareness and educate consumers as well. And this happened to me even when I started. When I was talking about sustainability, we were the first to sell bamboo toothbrushes in India. And I realized very early that I had to actually create a demand for the products.
Yeah.
Because I had to create awareness for
Awareness
why
around
do you
it.
even need a bamboo toothbrush in the first place?
And why do you need a bamboo?
Yeah. So plastic toothbrushes,
Yeah.
there are more than 5 billion on this planet.
Right.
And every toothbrush that you and I and everyone else has ever used is just sitting here somewhere on this planet. And it's largely because it's made out of plastic.
Yeah.
And plastic takes 700 odd years to start kind of disintegrating in the first place.
Yeah.
And it never fully does. It just kind of breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces of microplastics, and then lands up in the food chain and the water that we're then trying to kind of grow our food in, etc. And every week we're all consuming like a credit card size worth of microplastics. And microplastics is something that
Consuming, you mean ingesting?
we're literally ingesting it. And researchers found microplastics in breast milk, in blood, in our gut, in human poo. So it is literally, we are breathing it, we are consuming it. And that also is causing a lot of health impacts as well.
Underlying everything that you do today, right? I feel there's a strong worldview where you have a point of view on social equality and on justice. What do these mean to you at a personal level, at a soul level?
I think honestly, all of us are responsible to be part of the solution to make this world more equitable, more just, more sustainable, and the best version of it that it can possibly be. And I think, especially around waste, there is a huge social justice issue underlining all of it. where are incinerators located, where are landfills located. They're often in low-income neighborhoods, and that could be in India, but could also be, translate that to America, it's in a low income Latino neighborhood or an African American neighborhood. And I think even a lot of the times, waste is actually getting shipped to lots of developing countries because, again, I don't know what we're signaling, but someone else's land, water, universe.
Precious than someone else.
Exactly, and I think that is so problematic. So I think working in the waste space, really actually understanding it from very ground up perspective. I spent some time actually following waste warriors or waste pickers all around Bangalore city, kind of noticing the conditions in which they were segregating our waste, the lack of infrastructure systems around it, hearing stories about people losing their thumbs because when they were segregating there was actually a broken glass, all of that stuff. And I honestly got to just put aside my very elitist academic kind of Cambridge environmentalist perspective and just really humanize our waste problem from a very, very ground up perspective. And I think, it was those conversations that really humanized it. And for me, I really understood that there is an underlying social justice issue about how we consume, and we ought to be part of the solution. There's kind of no other way. So I think, that's a huge element. But I think also just, social justice in terms of equality, gender equality, those were kind of themes that I think shaped me in very subconscious ways growing up. And, trying to incorporate some versions of those solutions in what we're building, even at Bare Necessities. And that's, by virtue of a women-run production team that we have that make, ship, and package all of your amazing
So this is an all-women team.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So those are, just few small solutions that I know how I can be part of this big picture, but I think, underlying lots of kind of larger social justice and inequality issues.
You call them waste warriors, right? What was that first tryst that you had with them? Like you said, you had come back from Cambridge and your other kind of formal education. What made you start working with waste specifically and with waste pickers, of course, in particular?
Yeah. So when I moved back to Bangalore, I actually worked in the solar energy and access space. And I was trying and experimenting about, living a low waste lifestyle for myself. And I think my coworkers had kind of noticed that around me. And then when an opportunity arose to work with this waste picker community for a solar lighting intervention, they knew they had to put me on the project.
Okay.
I was actually really proud at that time when I was looking at new emerging Indian brands. And they were kind of championing millets and sustainable produce and things like that. And I was like, oh, there's something happening in this Indian startup ecosystem and things like that. And then on the other side, I was noticing kind of these mountains and mountains of trash that were all kind of producing. And I was like, every solution is also contributing to that same problem. So I think it was one of those, aha moments where I was like, gosh, we cannot be consuming at this unprecedented rate. If we want to give some resemblance of a nice planet, a livable, happy planet that we had the privilege and the honor of experiencing, we have to change something. And that was kind of the aha moment for me.
And what was it like to work with what you call waste warriors on a personal level, on a human level? What did you observe? What did you find? What were some of your most memorable interactions?
So I honestly worked with mostly the men in the community, and they did a lot of the cycling, going, collecting. And the women in the community largely did the sorting, and baling, and basically putting all of the dry plastics on one side, all of the cardboard on one side, dry coconut on one side, things like that. So they were mostly the segregators on site, but because that also gave them the flexibility of cooking on the side, the kids are there, all of that. And the men would do the work of hopping on their cycle, making retrofits with a little bit of, like a box that's associated with the cycle that they can then transport all of the trash to, etc. And I would notice how early everyone woke up. So actually, typical days start hopping on your bike at 5 a.m. And I would literally follow them until 9. And then I, obviously had the luxury of hopping into my car and then going, showering and being back at work. But I was just, thinking about, gosh, how long are they possibly doing this for? And even sometimes when I'm, just commuting from place to place and I see someone who's lugging around their trash and I'm like, I wonder if his day started, at 5 a.m. and if he's still going at 10 p.m. or whatnot.
Yeah.
But another thing that I noticed about the community is that they were very proud and they were so clean. They had this routine as soon as they came back, about genuinely having this ritualistic cleansing routine.
Yeah.
And then even the way they kept their homes, even though this was like super informal tarp homes,
Right.
they had so much pride, and there was little rangoli outside, and there was an attire that you wore when you went waste picking, and then there was washing, cleansing, and then you kind of enter home with kind of. So it was actually lots of things that I noticed. Just little things of on their cycle they had a little napkin. So every time they waste pick and they hop back on the cycle, they wipe their hands. And so I really noticed that. You might not associate them with being so clean, but they had so much pride and they were genuinely had like lots of cleansing routines, part of their day as well. But I got to also know them by like how many kids they had, how many months, in a year do they go back home, and lots of kind of other things that just made me humanize the community and the waste problem.
What does a day look like in the life of their children? Typically?
Yeah, so actually what we were trying to do was to set up a kind of school there. And there was someone who was interested actually, and it was someone who essentially they give all the waste to, and he then gives it to the next aggregator. But he was kind of, in exchange for his services, gives you protection, has a water tanker come into the land so you have access to water. So he would take care of other needs of the community. And he had an interest in kind of having someone come over and teach. And there are kids of so many ages that where do you start? Like, even if you were to have one session, maybe it would cater to a certain age group and not be relevant for other age groups. So I think there were a few struggles around having a formal education system around for the kids. But this community was kind of in the middle of nowhere near the Bangalore International Airport.
Okay.
But I know some communities who are closer to local schools have integrated their kids in the local school where, whether it's Kannada medium and English and Hindi, they all just kind of figure, and then you learn from an early age.
Yes,
so a lot of their kids were also speaking Kannada and everything,
nice.
Even though maybe their parents may not even speak it.
Yeah.
So that was also kind of interesting to know.
Ruth Ginsburg once said that, so often in life, things that you regard to be an impediment actually end up being great fortune. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit. But would you say that something like that has ever happened to you? Would you say that applies to you in any way?
Yeah, for sure. I think, first of all, Ruth Ginsburg is amazing and is super, super badass. I think she's paved the way for gender equality in so many ways. And so many things that we just take for granted is something that she has done, and from the 70s really been part of the movement. I think being a co-founder of the women's wing at the ACLU, being the second woman I think in her class, at least at Harvard Law, she did not take her position in any setting for granted. And of course, in her legal career, took on a lot of cases around gender to break down gender biases in the workplace, for reproductive rights, for rights associated with maternal care and paternal care as well.
Right.
So I think it's just phenomenal, everything that she has done. And I think, that quote, definitely I think something that has shaped me in a lot of ways is kind of, losing my dad at a very early age. And it was very hard. It was very dramatic. It was kind of life changed overnight. It was actually very hard because it was my sister's birthday and we all went out to dinner, and it was just a family Sunday dinner, and on our way we decided to get ice cream. And while we were attempting to cross the road, we had a speeding car kind of come into us and kind of change our lives forever. And that night has kind of shaped my way in so many ways. And it was very quickly we realized that it was us against the world in terms of navigating so many things, because the world as it is structured is very male dominant and also favors certain things. Even just smallest thing in India where your default land rights of owning a property or apartment, etc., is just a is a single ownership, versus most parts of Europe it's a dual ownership. So you immediately write two names.
Mm-hmm.
So women produce 70% of the world's food and actually own only 3% of the world's land. And all of this is backed by data, but it just made us realize from a very early age that you got to just work hard, hustle, and kind of navigate all of your next steps. So I think, I think it shaped me in lots of ways. It shaped my perspective about how I want to create a more inclusive space.
Right.
What is the space that women occupy? Whether it's the startup ecosystem or the fundraising ecosystem, what are these numbers? How come these numbers haven't changed dramatically? I remember going to the library and reading a book when I was in college, and it said roughly more institutional funding towards women, female founders is 2% globally, and that was a 2000 stat. And roughly, 2023, it's roughly the same. And the percentage is slightly higher when it is a female and a male co-founders of an enterprise, but still that number is like 6 or something percent. Last I checked. So it's really interesting how so much of the way the economies and life is structured, definitely we have a long way to go. Even though people like Ruth Ginsburg have done such phenomenal work, and I'm really cognizant of that. But I think it also kind of constantly highlights the amount of work that is left to be done.
Absolutely.
And that's us saying this with our privilege, sitting here and having a chat. But just imagine in kind of rural India,
or the kind of community we were just talking about.
Exactly, like what that means, and just not having access to so many things that we kind of now take for granted. I think it just shaped my worldview in a lot of ways. And trying to kind of see how I can best be part of that solution or understand that or have conversations around it was something that was really important.
So did you grow up in a family of strong women?
Oh yeah, for sure. I have 2 older sisters. My mom, I went to all-girls high school, and I had a super cute girl cat. But no, it's definitely kind of always had strong female role models all around me. My sister had a shoe company while she was in college, very entrepreneurial, and I think I got to kind of watch these amazing examples when I was growing up, which was super, super incredible.
There's this book that I used to read to my kid when he was growing up called The Lorax by Dr. Seuss. And sort of right at the end, there is this line that says, which I can never forget, which says, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Do you think that, Generation Alpha, so, the population that's kids today, are they more conscious of the environment? Are they more conscious of social justice than say, like my generation or a couple of generations before us? Do you think that there's a change?
Yeah, I mean, I do think there is some kind of level of cognizance and intuition, which has been like really beautiful. My sister has an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old, and just interacting and having those conversations. When she visited India and she noticed so many people like just around the streets begging and things like that, she asked such sweet, intelligent, and empathetic questions. And I think that just gave me a lot of faith about how this generation is growing, and I think they just have this really huge EQ, which only means they're going to help build a more equitable, just, and sustainable world.
I hope so, yeah. So who faces the biggest impact when it comes to climate change and global warming? Are certain groups more vulnerable than others?
Yeah, definitely. Coastal communities, island nations, by virtue of obviously the sea level rise, which means obviously, loss of land, loss of livelihood, and just loss all around, because obviously in those economies you can't produce, you can't do anything. So I think that's a huge one. Women and marginalized communities, people are already on the bottom of the pyramid, obviously would not have any extra income just sitting around to protect themselves from like floods and all of these dramatic weather conditions and things that are changing. Farmers, obviously the agrarian cycles, because of all of their kind of cycles associated with harvesting, etc., have been drastically impacted because of also the rain patterns being completely massively impacted, and just all of the things around climate change. So I think they are facing a huge kind of loss of livelihood because of all of the unpredictabilities associated with the weather patterns, etc. So I think essentially everyone who's kind of at the bottom of the pyramid, and everyone who's already kind of facing enough struggle is only going to be impacted even more, and kind of the impacts of climate change is going to just exacerbate their condition, unfortunately. So really important for us to build more climate resilient cities, be more cognizant of how we can be more inclusive. What does that mean from a low income housing perspective? What does that mean from how we build? How do we use more natural material while we build? How are we also creating some amount of social equity so we can build more people up? How are we also thinking about our own actions from a day-to-day level? How we kind of, curbing our emissions from a personal level, but also kind of city, state, national level, to just hopefully all be part of the solution to kind of combat climate change.
While this might be intuitive, I still want to ask you this because I'm sure that you'll have very specific insights, So you said women and marginalized communities face more of a fallout. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure.
Why specifically? How does it impact their lives?
Yeah, for sure. If you look at most rural communities, who is in charge of collecting fuel and water for the household?
Women.
It's the girls, it's the women. Who is not in school because they're too busy walking, collecting, water, but also kind of sticks, etc., to just keep up with the energy needs and the kind of water needs and then of their household. So again, what does that mean? There's no water. There's water shortage. Climate change has kind of impacted like lots of things. But just say that in this particular region there is drought going on. Now the women have to now walk even more to try and find some forms of access of water to bring it back to their home to kind of support their home. So it's only impacting women in a disproportionate way. Marginalized communities, whether you are a tribal community and you are a migratory community, you might be a nomadic community, and your livelihood might depend on whether you're a shepherd community. So many things depend upon where is the green space and how, what is your usual route, etc.
And how far do you have to go to?
Exactly. And so many things it's completely changing that you have no predictability. It's not like you have insurance sitting here somewhere that you can say, oh, you know what, I can't go to the northeastern part of my route that I usually go, and I'm going to be able to navigate, and I'm going to go into this part because this has more greenery at this time. We don't even have that kind of access to information and things like that. So. Unfortunately, communities, especially the tribal and nomadic community, don't even have a lot of land rights. They don't have ID cards, completely excluded from the legal system except for the 600 tribes that I mentioned. So how do we kind of work with these communities to help build more resilience, especially when they're kind of being impacted by climate change, is going to be one of the biggest challenges of our lifetime.
So what inspired you to start Bare Necessities? Was it an incident? Was it part of a journey? What was that turning point?
Yeah, for sure. I think I've been really excited about sustainability for a long time, but I think it was working with waste pickers, and I noticed kind of, how we need to create more sustainable products that are destined not to land up in the oceans or landfills. And that's when I personally started to live a more low waste lifestyle. And then while I was living, trying or experimenting, I realized that maybe there are others who are also looking to consume more mindfully. And that's how Bare Necessities was born. And we try and make necessities and daily products that you might need from the minute you wake up to the minute you sleep, that are all packaged in an earth-friendly manner, that celebrate lots of natural ingredients, lots of Indian ingredients, and basically have a kinder impact on our planet.
Is everything compostable except, of course, the glass jars which can be reused? So for instance, I've bought and used and loved your soaps and so many other products. If I have just a balcony with a few pots, can I compost the packaging just right there?
Yeah, for sure. So all of our packaging is basically recyclable, reusable, or fully compostable. So for example, if you had a cardboard box that everything got shipped to you, and you'll have to break it down into small pieces, or shred it or make it into small pieces, and you can use it as a brown layer in your khamba or in your compost that you might have at home. And because the richness of all of the wet matter and the combination with the brown matter obviously helps it kind of go back to the earth and kind of make this amazing rich compost and black gold in 3 weeks or 4 weeks, or depending on if you have a little neem or microbes to expedite that. And of course, the glass jars you can use, whether you want to use it for jam jars or pencil stands or whatever. And equally, if you don't have that much room or you don't have a compost, you can also just segregate all of your dry waste, and you can give it in, suppose you live, so in Bangalore actually, the BBMP website locates all of the wards, and you can go and give your dry waste there. But also now most apartments also collect your dry waste. So it's super accessible to find a Radiwala or a BBMP center that is a waste segregation center, or even just in your apartment complex, etc., that will take kind of your dry waste.
And there are also some super innovative products you have, such as detergents, but without the water component. So they're just in the powder form, right? Can you talk a little bit more about that? Why did you think of that, and what difference does it make in the long run?
Yeah, for sure. So most detergents that you might think of, like that we use to launder our clothes, they typically come in these like bulky 1 kg odd containers, right? And essentially this is the idea to make the exact opposite. So we're just giving you a super small, compact sachet that has only the 10% of the active ingredients that you truly need. So we're saying, why are we paying to ship water across the country when we can just give you that 10% active ingredients? So you just add water, and it's super accessible. It's also a really fun DIY to do with like kids. But from a solution-oriented approach, we're saying, hey, we're lightening your carbon footprint because you're not, logistic costs are reduced, and the carbon emissions in transporting items that are heavy and bulky versus something that is so compact. So basically, it also reduces your carbon dioxide emissions by 80 to 90%. So we're just trying to be innovative and plug and play wherever we can, solutions that can be possibly part of the solution, around sustainability and climate change. So yeah, that's one of our solutions.
When you say it, it just makes so much sense that I am wondering, A, of course, why did I never think of this? But B, and much more importantly, why do we as a society even have products like this that are, sort of a large component is water, and it's not necessary. It costs that much in terms of transportation. It weighs that much more, etc. Why is that even a thing?
Yeah, honestly, if you look at the history of plastics, it's very interesting. So actually, in World War, especially World War II, the companies came up with plastic, and it was used to, help soldiers protect their food, save their food, increase the shelf life of their food, especially while they were obviously posted all across the world amidst the world wars. And then post that, the companies were like, oh, okay, now what? What are we going to use plastic for? And then came this emergence of kind of the 50s, and women then buying store-bought stuff, especially in America. A lot of the iconic ads are around that. And it was interesting because it allowed women to maybe start entering the workforce, because now you have a lot of packaged food available.
Right.
So that was also very interesting, and that's a great advantage that plastic has given women, actually. Right? And then what happened was we didn't understand the negative impact.
Yeah.
And us humans, we don't understand how to do things in moderation. We always have to overdo things, whether that's, access to technology and swiping on Instagram to consuming. And plastic just started to invade our economies and lifestyle at this insanely unprecedented rate. And now, everything that we know in 2023, after all of the research, etc., we're trying to kind of undo it. But we've also gone so far with this web of convenience, and also being marketed things in a certain way with a certain rhetoric. And some could be fear-based, some could be convenience-based, some we've just gotten used to and habit-based. So to unlearn that, it's going to take a lot of emerging sustainable brands to kind of push the needle on this and maybe help us go back to our roots. If you think about maybe what did your grandparents use to wash dishes? They use like a coconut scrubby.
Yes, exactly.
They'll
With
use like an
ash
ash.
and,
Exactly. And those were all powdered formats. They might use Rita that was all powdered. So it was the format that was most non-polluting to the groundwater that was going down in your tap. And chances are maybe a few generations earlier, they were also producing food in the same vicinity, right? And in my grandma's house, till now, there is, if you need tomatoes, if you need curry patta, anything, you literally, first thing is you go to the garden and just grab it from there. So I think it just, the way we've mass consumed, combination of urbanization, etc., has just led us in this mess that we currently are. So it'll just need a lot of awareness and lots of people asking good questions to help push the needle.
So are you hopeful that we will be able, to sort of take a few steps back and undo some of this damage that we've done?
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
Why is that though? I'm just wondering.
So I think just the amount of innovation that's going on in the space, the amount of amazing environmental entrepreneurs doing stuff. If you look at energy storage, it is just becoming smarter and sleeker, and electric vehicles. Everything is being leapfrogged, and it's really interesting, right? And a simple example that everyone can relate to is we had our kind of digital, our landlines, right? And then in India, we just kind of leapfrogged to the digital revolution where everyone then had mobile phones, right? And the same thing is kind of happening in the EV space, right? We are leapfrogging in terms of making electric vehicles more accessible. From a price point as well, there's lots of innovation happening on it. The Tata EV is actually at a very, very accessible price point. Of course, not to maybe the Aam Aadmi, but that only means it's only going to get better. So I think just the amount of amazing entrepreneurs, people, researchers, botanical illustrators, everyone just being part of the ecosystem and doing such amazing work keeps me super optimistic that we can kind of reverse the impacts of climate change that we're currently facing. If we just compost all of our food waste, we're helping save 60% of our waste from ever entering the landfills.
Wow.
So, there are so many ways in which we can actually reverse engineer and, basically reverse climate change.
Speaking of pricing, because you brought that up, with EVs and things, when it comes to your brand, I'm sure that there are struggles in terms of keeping the price accessible, because I know that social justice means something to you, that your product should be accessible to a wider audience means something to you. So when it comes to kind of keeping your prices lower versus profits versus a value system, then what wins and how?
Yeah. I'm definitely going to say that I haven't mastered it all. I'm still a seeker, I'm still learning. But I think it is interesting. We've done several experiments, and I don't know if it's the right thing or wrong thing. But whenever we've hit some versions of scale, we've actually reduced the prices to make it more accessible to consumers. And that's a very non-traditional move. We try to take that benefit to our consumers to see, hey, will that mean that more people can then start being part of the solution by virtue of their daily necessities and how they might consume. There are lots of things that are actually happening in the world that actually really impacts pricing. Things like war, things like inflations and things like that, access to fuel prices, all of that will then also, that impacts your entire supply chain, because then it means that everything is becoming more expensive, right? So yeah, I think we're trying our best, and only time will tell if we're doing the right things too.
But for now, what does your accountant say?
I think we can always do better, and I think the environmental activist in me sometimes wants to just be a big kumbaya and just make it all super accessible. But it's great that I have teammates who keep me accountable and who actually have all of the skills that I don't have. So I think it kind of keeps us all grounded.
How is it working with your husband as a partner?
Depends on the day that you ask me.
Okay. Well, generally.
Overall, it's actually really nice because we actually met first through work. So we had a nice long-standing work relationship before kind of...
He's an environmentalist as well.
Yeah. So Mehul also cares about sustainability and joined the Bare team in 2019. So we have this rule, which is if one person asks and says, hey, can I talk about work? And the other person says, no, it's a no. And, because it could be like, a cute date night, and then you're like, oh my God, I have this amazing, brilliant idea. Too bad, you just have to remember that for a later time. So I think that kind of helps, at least for me, bring some more balance into my life. And another thing is just have separate areas. Like Mehul is the last call on all things marketing, and I am the last call on all things product and impact. So we're just kind of having also a very clear distinction, I think also really helps.
In terms of your role.
Yeah.
But in terms of the perspective that he brings into the brand, I'm sure that everybody is the richer for it, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's so much. I'm so grateful that we have an amazing team and everyone actually brings their perspective. And I think, it's more brains just thinking about accessibility and sustainability and low waste living, which is a huge benefit.
No one's perfect, and I know that in spite of how hard we try, there are always areas that can get a little better. So, and for someone like you, are there, little parts of your life that make you feel terrible, that are not as sustainable as they could be?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, when I first started on my low waste journey, I was very militant. Like, my mom would call me, like, the plastic Nazi. I was like super, like, I'm only going to buy groceries from this one shop, Buffalo Bag Collective, on my way back, because everything is is like package free, etc. And then, honestly, the pandemic happened, and it was impossible for you to be, go to all of your local vendors and do all of the things that you used to do. And it just made me realize that sustainability is people, planet, profit. And maybe at different times and stages of your life, some motivation might be a little stronger at that time. And maybe for me at that time, people were a little bit, that aspect of sustainability just hit to my heart more than maybe some of the other more militant parts, because of everything that was happening, around us in the pandemic. And, I'd also made some dramatic life changes. Like, I used to wear contact lenses. And then I said, I'm going to do the math, and this is the true cost of this, and I got a LASIK. Trying to do big and small things to just say, like, okay, how can I best live my values, and what is possible and what's not possible, and acknowledging the what is not possible just has made me so free.
I feel like, when you're saying what you're saying, there is so much you feel so strongly about all of the issues that you work with on a regular basis, but at the same time there is acceptance of how we can end up living our lives, and what is okay for a family, or what is okay on a more day-to-day level. How did that acceptance come about? You did mention COVID, but was there anything else?
I think, everything that we do as a society, we try and put ourselves in boxes, like whether it is a small, medium, large, whether it is, this religion or that. Social constructs work in a way that we like boxes, but actually things are actually more gray. They're not so black and white. And actually in my late 20s, early 30s, I'm just valuing all of these things more, and realizing that, what really makes life, colorful and meaningful to me, and what gives you those nice feelings on the inside. And I think creating more boundaries and more labels sometimes actually does a more disservice, and keeping it more free-flowing actually creates more collaboration, creates more opportunity to humanize the other, and I just like that approach more.
What are some of these labels that you felt were attributed to you a little too much, or unfairly, or and in what ways have you kind of let go of some of them?
Yeah, I think a part of my identity, which is the Muslim woman identity, has kind of got a new definition, with like recent life events, which is I just got married to Mehul, who is a Hindu man. And it was really important for me to use our marriage as this great social experiment, but also as like an invitation to people to dehumanize the other, which, if our wedding celebration was kind of a good example of that. We asked our parents what were things that matter to them or things that they'd like to incorporate, but we largely kind of wrote our own ceremony and made like a very secular, and we just put everything that we thought was fun, it just made it our own version of our ceremony.
And you designed it. What are some of the simple things that we can all do in our daily lives to reduce our footprint?
Yeah, segregate your waste, so your wet waste and your dry waste. Try and compost your wet waste if you can. If not, see if you can give it to kind of in your apartment complex if they're segregating, etc. And then carry your own reusables. So that could be a water bottle, it could be your mug, it could be your stainless steel straw for nariyal pani. Carry some rags and carry some towels, carry some towels if you can, so you're not constantly using paper towels, etc. And just being more mindful of your consumption. So asking yourself if you really need it before you purchase something, being part of the thrifting solution and kind of the repair economy. So can you fix something? Can you give the local cobbler Anna, a little bit of livelihood while you're fixing your shoes, bags, etc. So yeah, I think just being mindful of our footprint and how much we actually truly need, and versus what is a shiny, quick, kind of impulsive purchase, etc.
Yeah. That voice in your head, that drives you to do what you do every day? What is that voice saying?
Do your bit to be part of the solution. And it could be in a big way, small way, but whatever you can, try and be a part of the solution.
Amazing. And I find you so optimistic. I mean, the fact that you said that this can be reversed. So which woman has been your greatest inspiration?
I think it'll have to be Ruth Ginsburg.
Okay.
I think Ruth Ginsburg is just super badass. I think she was an inspiration to everyone in the entire world. I think she used her dissent statements that were often very bold, to just educate her fellow jurists about her perspective. And, there was no being apologetic or anything. She was just so herself, authentically herself, very, very liberal, very clear about what equity means, what justice means, what the intersectionality of all of that means. And I think she's just super cool because, even though she was super kind of democratic in her leanings and opinions, she had friends who were Republican. She would frequent the opera with them.
And yet kind of rejecting the labels, like what I can see that you're doing. So I can see how that inspiration is translating into your life and, what you are.
Too kind.
Are you ready to be dressed up as Ruth Ginsburg?
Yeah, let's do it.
I was so happy when Sahar said she wanted to reenact Ruth Ginsburg because I thought it would be a challenging look to achieve and yet fun and interesting. One of the first thoughts I had is that I don't want to recreate a cloak. Instead, I just wanted to drape a black fabric so that it flows in a similar way and kind of gives us a similar silhouette. We put all of this together on Sahar, and it was such a beautiful contrast to how she normally dresses. So I actually really loved doing this look and putting this together. I have to thank you, Sahar, for being on our podcast and for having this really open conversation with me and really enlightening also. And, I'm sort of going away with a few sort of action points already. And, really, thank you so much. It's been amazing.
No, thank you so much for having me. It was a blast talking to you. Thanks.